Perfect. Well, we've got a great attendance for a summer day to listen to about Sage Intacct purchasing approvals. But want to welcome everyone today. As I said, I'm Stuart Blumenthal. I'm the Intacct Practice Director here. And today, Carol is going to be going over purchase orders, approvals, tips, and tricks, which is probably one of our most commonly requested areas. She'll be doing the presentation. If you want to hit the next slide there, Carol, we're going to be, sorry, this presentation is about 30 minutes long. It's going to be, all the phone lines are muted. So if you have any questions along the way, just put them in the questions feature. I'm going to be monitoring that as Carol does the entire presentation because she's done a great job getting this all ready. And if you want a copy of this presentation, just let me know, put it in there, and I'll make sure you get a copy of the PDF of the PowerPoint once we're done with this today. So without further ado, Carol, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you perfectly.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar to go over the purchasing approval process in Sage Intacct and what options Sage Intacct offers. I'm excited to talk about that. And without further ado, we're going to get started. And I figured it's good to start at the top as to why it's good to set up approvals in Sage Intacct. Usually we've seen customers or clients who the prior process is having paperwork and they constantly have to hunt people down or approvers to sign it, and then it gets scanned, or it's in email chains. That now doesn't need to happen. All that can happen in Intacct. It also saves people hours on the scanning of the POs, depending on the quantity that's being processed on a daily or weekly basis. So that gets taken care of. Also, it keeps all the audit trail inside of Intacct, so you can see all the people who approved, when they approved them with timestamps, and also if purchase orders or commitments got declined, you can also see that workflow as well. And then when they get resubmitted again or reapproved again, Intacct keeps that on a beautiful audit trail of all that information. And then we also have the ability to have multiple levels of approvers and also multiple types. And I will show you through an example as we go through this presentation. Intacct also allows us, when we're approving or declining, to add a note or a comment to either send it back if something is not right. So you don't have to start an email chain to ping the person who submitted it for them to fix something. You can do all that within Intacct, and then they get a notification that a purchase order was declined, for example. They see your reason why, and then they can go into the purchase order, fix it, and then resubmit it again. So that keeps the email chains, the emails cleaner, if you will. And then we can also track where an invoice is. Another reason why to set up purchase order approvals, we can actually track who is holding it. If there's a PO that needs to go out ASAP and it's in somebody's queue, we can actually see where it's sitting and reach out to that person or that approver or that PM and to let them know to approve it. And then it keeps, and then it goes through the rest of the approval flow. The other beautiful, beautiful thing I love about Sage Intacct's purchase order approvals is the ability to have a delegate. People need to take some time off. They need to go on vacation. Work-life balance is important. And so when you're on vacation, the last thing you want to do is get pinged by the company or people in the company for you to approve a PO that can't wait for you to return. The purchase order workflow has an option for you to set up a delegate. So when you're out of office, you can set up the person who should be your backup or who should now take over while you're away. And then that way the business keeps flowing as usual and you get to enjoy your vacation. So that's one of the best features that I've seen on the purchasing side for me personally. As an end user and also as an implementer, it's a beautiful feature to see, and I'll show you how that works. And then we also just save some trees from printing a lot of paperwork that we are hunting people down. So these are some of the reasons to set up the purchase order PO approval flows. And then now I will show you what the requirements should be, and then we'll just keep on going with the process. First things first, we have to make sure you have the purchase order module. And then we have to make sure we set up the right permissions for whoever the users are, and the users would be whoever is submitting the purchase order, and also who the approvers are. It could be 1 person, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It depends on the nature of the business or the workflow that we need to set up, for example, and I'll show you what that looks like. We also need to set up the queue, what I call queues, or what Intacct calls transaction definitions. And this is just like the purchase order queue. And then when the material, for example, comes in, it gets received, if you will, or it gets invoiced. Those are called transaction definitions. Those are the places, those are the queues that we actually would assign the approval flows, or where you want the approvers to hit in the process of this purchase order going through the workflow until it gets into the AP side of things to be paid. Then the biggest piece here is to determine the nature of the workflow, and this varies by customer, and it also varies by client, if you will. And Intacct, Intacct is nimble enough to accommodate a lot of the options that we receive on our end as implementers. So to show you how it is set up, we can either set up, this is kind of just a screenshot of how or where in purchasing it would be set up. And this, because of the intricacy of it, I'm going to keep it as simple as possible, because it has the ability to get very complicated depending on what each customer would like set up. But I'll keep it simple in this time, but also cover all the options. So one of the options that we can set up is a department-based approval. If you have a construction department, estimating department, field operation department, accounting department, marketing department, you can set up approval flows based on departments. If you don't have departments, we can also set it up by, we can also set it up by the department manager workflow as well, so that all transactions that are linked to that department go straight to that manager, who is the head of that department. The other option we have is what we call a value threshold based option. This is just when you want tiers of multiple people approving at different thresholds, we can now combine that. So if I have an PO at 10,000, it needs to go through, for example, 1 person, or it needs to go through 2 people. The first person approves up to 5,000, and then the second person approves up to 10,000. So that PO would go through 2 people. That's what a value threshold, for example, would be. Or you can have a mixture of all 3 or 2 of them. Again, it just depends on the flexibility. This shows us the flexibility of Intacct, but it also allows us to accommodate all the different types of the nature of the approval flows that each customer, if you will, would like to set up. And so this is just a screenshot showing the different types that we can select from the purchase or purchasing side of things. And then now I'll show you what one would look like. This is what a value approval threshold looks like. You can set up the tiers. You can have level 1 from anything from 0 to up to 5,000. And then on the last column, you can see how many people can approve that transaction or that invoice, if you will, or that purchase order. In this case, I only set it up to be 1 person. Then if the PO is over 5,000, let's say it's 17,000, then it would be approved by the level 1 person and also the level 2 person. And then it stops there. Then if it happens to be 35,000, for example, it will go through and be approved by 4 people. 4 people meaning on level 1, it goes through the 5,000 person. Level 2, it goes through the 25,000 person. And then on level 3, if you look at the minimum approvers column, the last column, you see there's a number 2. That means there's a minimum of 2 people who should approve this invoice, which means it needs to be approved by the first person, and then the second person who is assigned or who is given this level of approval also needs to sign off on it. And then once all 4 people have signed off, then this is considered a completely approved invoice, if you will. So it can get really complicated, and then you can go to level 5 and level 4 and level 5 and level 6 with different people or different counts of people approving. That's just the value approval threshold. So it's dollar-based and people-based, level and threshold, and how many people per level can approve. And then any questions so far?
Yeah, we have one question. Can an approval workflow be set up for any document type?
For any document type, like the transaction definition?
I would
Is that what
assume
I'm
that is the
understanding?
question. Yep.
Yes, the answer is yes. Correct.
Awesome.
So if you have 3 document types, for example, and you want approvals for all 3, you can set up each approval, not threshold, each approval flow for each one of them. And they can all be different as well.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. And then, so that's the value, and hopefully we will keep track of this because it's going to be a point where I'm going to combine both of them. So value is amounts and level, and as you can see, I'm not assigning it to a particular name or a department manager or a project manager or a superintendent. There's no name on here. So when it comes to setting up the user, that's where we now need to know how to assign these permissions correctly. And we can work with you at that point to help you set that up. So that's value. Then we're gonna head on to the department approval. This is one of my favorite ones that I really like to use, and I will tell you why. So in this case, if you have we have the department 3000 GC construction. The other cool thing I normally do is on the description, it's always good to type in who the approvers are, if you will, and I'll show you why. In this case, so I'm going to set it up as 2 people. I'm going to be the first approver up to 10,000 for this department, and anything above 10,000, Stuart is responsible for approving that. So anything below 10,000 just goes to me. It never sees Stuart's approval queue. Anything above 10,000, both of us have to approve it. That's what department, but then it's only for the 3,000 department, which is GC construction. Now, if you have another department, let's call it estimating, then in this case, there are 3 approvers that need to have where the invoices need to flow through. In this case, I have Stuart as the first one, then up to 10,000, then I'm the second one of up to 25,000, and then we have Sue, who approves anything above 25,000, and anything less than that doesn't even hit our queue at all for approval. Now this is the second department. As you can see, you can even vary by department. You can have multiple people or different levels. Now, not different levels. You can have different thresholds, but you can also assign them to different people. And by department on top of that. So those are the 2 examples of departments that I wanted to show. And then on this final screen, this is what the department approvals would look like. And then you can add the additional departments at the bottom. I just added these 2, for example. On the description, this one that at the top here on the left, right below the estimating department ID, this description is helpful. It's helped me because you can now see, even without clicking into the department, this already tells you quickly who the approvers are. Also, let's assume I'm no longer with the company. At this point, when I'm getting inactivated out of the system, I still need to be removed from this department flow approvals because I'm no longer there. So this is also very helpful to come in and if we have a new person or somebody who's stepping in on my behalf until somebody else gets hired, for example, this is where you can come in quickly while you're removing me out of the system. You can now change my name to the standing person or to the new manager, for example, who has been hired. So it keeps things neat and accurate and to the point. And it also tells you quickly by departments, especially when you have a lot of departments, who the approvers are in a nutshell. The only other way to find these pieces out is to click on the little pencil button. Then you have to drill down, and then you have to now see this process right here. So this described in the description is really nice. So it's one of my little cheat sheets that I use when I set these approval flows up. And then now the other beautiful thing about Intacct, we can actually also add another level of approval. So we have the value, which was the threshold. We can also combine that with a department. So departments, the usual, but then if we have a big invoice, let's say over 100,000 or more, or over $1 million or $500,000 or 250,000, whatever that threshold is determined by each customer, we can have a primary or a final person who's quite high up or 2 or 3 or 4 people who are quite high up who need to approve these POs, for example. In this case, I just made a test example of like a CFO or a project manager who needs to approve anything over $100,000 from any department. $100,000 or more needs to go through these 2 people. And so as you can see, this is now a level 1 of 100,000 and more, and it requires a minimum of 2 people to approve. In this case, the PM and the CFO, if you will, need to approve this. So the invoice or the PO will go through the process, and I'll show you with that. But to highlight this piece before I move forward, this is also another very powerful piece of the purchase order approval in Intacct, because you can combine multiple types of approvals to cover, or to really cover the whole gamut, if you will, of the needs of your process, if you will, which is very nice. We're not restricted to just department. We're not restricted to just value. We can combine both. Also, on top of that, we can also bring in another level. Let's say we add another level of a CEO, for example. A CEO can approve like $1 million and above. You can now actually just add another level and just tag the CEO's name, and then that could be the third final piece for the really, really big POs, if you will. And now to kind of show you as a test purchase order, I put in a purchase order to this construction company for $80,000. Actually, I changed it to, my apologies, I changed it to $120,000 because I wanted us to see this value approval threshold pick up for the $100,000, if you will. I wanted us to see all 3. So let's replace this with $120,000. And then this is that invoice. And as you can see, this is the $120,000. My apologies, I forgot to retake the screenshot for the $120,000 and replace it on the 80. In this case, since I linked it to the 3,000 department, so as you can see here, the top part, it's submitted. That shows that there's an approval flow in process, because if there wasn't, this invoice would have gone straight from it would have gone straight to be, say, posted, if you will. But because there's an approval flow, it has to be submitted. Then once the first person approves it, then it changes to partially approved. It's waiting for the second person and the third one and the fourth one until it fully says posted, if you will. So that's the first thing to note. The second piece is, as you can see on the second screenshot, I have it coded to the 3,000 department. I have my project, my cost code, my department, and then my item, and then my totals here. Let's replace that to 120,000. So I coded it to the 3,000 GC department. In this case, on the GC department, we should be going through me and then Stuart, because it's 120,000. Then it needs to hit this final approver because it's over the CFO, or PM because it's over 100,000. And to confirm that it works like that, you can see the first 2 lines. It needs to go through me. It is submitted to me under state. It's submitted to me, so I have to go through it first. And then once I take a look and everything looks good, then I approve it. Then it will say submitted to Stuart's queue. And then once Stuart goes through it and confirms everything looks good, it now goes through to the CFO and the PM, and both of them have to approve it. And those are the 2 screenshots here below to show the 2 pieces of approvals that it should go through. Any questions so far?
Only question that came in, it was that can they create a route based on a specific job? Can it be based upon a job, not a transaction type?
For a job, let me see here. I don't believe so, but let's look at the options that we have here. So the only options that we can select from are either project manager, the location, the department, the employee manager, the department, or the value threshold. So we're not able to do it on a project. And I've actually been asked that question before, so not yet.
Perfect, great question, but we'll put that in as a feature request.
Correct. Okay, back to here. So that shows you that the approval flow is set up correctly and it's working as expected. And then once all those people go in and approve the PO, then it can go straight to AP and get paid. If one of them rejects it and they decline it because something is not right, it goes straight to the beginning of the queue. It comes back to the submitter or the requester who put in the PO in the first place. They need to edit it and change it and then resubmit it again. And then it begins this whole process again. But it doesn't delete this history. It just continues on after the final value approver. It just tags on the second round of approvals. So you get to see both what happened before and then what happened after. And then the other cool thing about purchase order approvals is something we call delegates, which I kind of touched on in the beginning, which is also another feature that I really appreciate. If I'm on vacation and I don't want to be bothered to process the purchase orders, or I don't even have access to internet capability, then I can set up somebody. In this case, I have set mine up for Stuart, row 12. I have set Stuart to be my delegate or my backup, if you will. And then I'm his backup in row 7. You can't be your own backup. And so in this case, the only tip on this one is before I check out for the day or before I set up my out of office, my queue has to be clear for any approvals before I can turn on the delegation. Because if you turn on the delegation too early and you had some items in some purchase orders in my queue to approve and I didn't get to them, they will be stuck in that queue until I come back or until I remove the delegation. So anything new going forward or any new purchase orders submitted going forward after I have set up the delegation, those will now be routed to Stuart for approval. But anything that was in my queue will still be stuck in my queue. So it's always important to make sure that we clear the queue before we turn on the delegation piece. However, it does happen that there was something that maybe timing wise that hit my queue. I thought I'd cleared it, but maybe I missed something, or I took too long to turn on the delegation and something else slid in my queue. There's this option that we have called unrestricted user. This user is so powerful, and if not used correctly, it can kind of, somebody can do things that they didn't mean to. What I mean by that is, let's say another person, let's say Stuart, I'm his delegate, and he's on vacation, and he missed something is in his queue, and he didn't get, it's stuck in there because his delegation is turned on. What I can do is I can go in as an unrestricted user and go into and find that purchase order that cannot wait for his return to be approved. It needs to get going. I can turn myself on as the unrestricted user, find that purchase order, and then go and approve it. What that does is it just doesn't move it from Stuart's queue, Stuart's queue. It approves on behalf of everyone. That's how powerful it is. So if this was the same case of $120,000 purchase order that needed to go through 4 people, it had gone through me, it was in Stuart's queue, and then it needs to go through the CFO and the PM, for example, because it's over 100,000. With this user, once I approve it, even the CFO and the PM will not be able to see it. That's how powerful it is. That's why I say here, proceed with caution, because sometimes you can go in and select all invoices, if you will, that are in the approval queue, and then without knowing, you approve on behalf of everyone. So then the only way to now get those back, to get through the people who need to approve them, is to now edit them and submit them again, and then they have to go through the approval flow again. So this is just to be used very cautiously, and also only when needed, if you will. But at least it allows us to get moving and not have something stuck in the queue. The other option is to leave it in the queue and then put in a brand new invoice purchase order, but then that creates a duplicate. So this option allows us not to have to go through that route. And that kind of summarizes up what the process for the purchase order approval flow in Intacct looks like, and how it can be set up, what the options are, and also the delegation, and also the unrestricted user. That is all I had for today. It's really that simple.
Awesome. So there was one last question that came in. It says, is it possible to set up is it possible to set up the screen share or screen on how the approval email will look? So the approval, I don't know if you have a copy of the approval email, but that's something that we don't have the ability to customize. It's just basically it's a very generic message that comes from the system.
Correct. Let me see. Let me see if I can. Yes, it's very generic, and I did not set it up, but that's something I can definitely share outside of this call and what that would look like.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yep.
So yeah, send me that to me, and I'll send that over to who asked that. So
Okay, sounds good.
Any other questions we have? Does not look like it. So
I just have a question on that one. So there's multiple emails. If I may ask a question back. So there's an email of so let's say I submitted the purchase order. I can also receive emails when they go through the approval flow. There's those emails. Or do we want to see, or when it gets approved, I can also receive an email back saying Stuart has approved it, Carol has approved it, PM has approved it. Which emails do we want to see?
I would say send them to me and I will send them over.
Okay, all right, I'll send all. Gonna be quite a bit of emails, but yeah, okay, sounds good. I will also send you the declined one too, so they can see what that looks like.
Perfect. And I think this other question, I'll take this other one offline. So I'll send you. So the person who's asking the question, I'll send you the emails, and then I'll take this one offline as well. So okay. I think I know what you're asking for. So is it possible to make it non-generic? The answer is no. They're not customizable. So so with that, I think we have one more slide after this here where we have our next webinars. So just real quick, we have a real estate one coming up on July 13th. We will be then doing another one on the 17th of August on the AP and GL approval process, because those are different. The approval processes in there are very different. So we'll have a webinar on that. And then in September, we've got two more. We have bank feeds, and we have our construction payroll one as well. That one's new. So the Sage has released the Intacct construction payroll module. We've been working with it for the last year and a half, but we'll be doing a webinar on some of the tips and tricks on that on September 21st. So feel free to, if you didn't get the email this morning with that information, let me know and I'll be happy to forward you the links and all that. We will be having another one sometime in August once we know the date of the R2 release. No, sorry, the R3 release. Too many releases in the year. The R3 release of Sage Intacct, which will include some of the compliance aspects that we've been waiting for. So once we have that, we'll be getting that scheduled in the August timeframe so that everyone can see the new compliance features within the system. And want to thank everyone for today's time. I think hopefully it was well worth it, right on the 30-minute mark. So appreciate everyone's time today. Have a great one.
Thank you.